No role plays, just real. Chris and Lorenzo share 4 decades of combined experience to help you become a more effective leader.
We've never really, as a workforce, spent a lot of time on making sure we're developing good leaders.
We'll be able to share stories, experience, mistakes, failures, successes.
This is Hacking Your Leadership.
Welcome to Hacking Your Leadership. I'm Chris.
And I'm Lorenzo.
And Lorenzo, on this episode, I want to talk about a Fast Company article I saw a few days ago. And it was titled The Next Great Resignation Challenge, Managing the Prematurely Promoted. And this kind of piqued my interest because I have said for a long time, even long before COVID, that I thought that part of the leadership problem that we have in the workforce are people being prematurely promoted. And it's based first on the fact that I was prematurely promoted when I was 19 years old, didn't deserve to be, and really almost, if it wasn't for the work of a couple of good mentors and leaders to help me get through it, I would have failed and I would have burned out of it and left. And I think a lot of other people are in the same position now and have been over the years that I was in, 25 years ago, and they're struggling. And I think, this is a fantastic article because, a lot of people are using the post-pandemic life to level up in their career. There's a lot of companies are hiring, wages are going up. There's a lot of people who are looking at this opportunity to go, how can I move forward in my career? How can I get more from this opportunity? And they're leveraging that into different companies with more responsibility and bigger roles. And there are definitely people doing that and going into roles that they really shouldn't be in from a leadership perspective. Because they've never done it before. I'm wondering what your thoughts are on this, because I think this is one of those things where it will eventually come to a head, and there will be a lot of either people who have to resign again, or they'll burn out, or they'll sit there and ruin life for others because they're in the wrong role.
So I think that first and foremost, like, all of us are always prematurely promoted. Like, that's actually a part of the
right.
the gig, right?
The Peter principle, right?
Exactly. Yeah. Like you don't know what the job is until you have it, for the most part. I think what you were saying, though, from a leadership standpoint is where I agree, especially because the speed in which leadership is changing in regards to the expectation by the workforce, but also by organizations and other leaders. So I think what ends up happening is, like, we're all going to take on jobs that you could say we're prematurely promoted into, like more responsibility, different things, different tactics, different relationships, whether you're promoting, amongst a team that you worked with or a new team. Like, there's always these elements of just trying to find your way and kind of figure things out. But I think that where a lot of people will maybe run into the harder times in regards to the prematurely promoted from a leadership standpoint is when maybe your view of leadership or what you expect from a leader is a person that may have subscribe to some more antiquated styles of leadership where they, like, maybe you had a leader that wasn't as didn't have as much emotional EQ, wasn't as comfortable in the spaces around empowerment and diversity and inclusion and equity and, like, all these common topics right now that we talk a lot about.
Right.
They weren't really either comfortable or effective in some of those spaces. And so if you see leadership in that way and then you also get prematurely promoted, I think you find yourself in this space of trying to navigate a new career opportunity, responsibility, then while also maybe even having some missteps in the people space, which is right now, something that can cause a lot of short-term and long-term damage to your leadership brand and the work that you're trying to accomplish.
Right. I see that as kind of like a little bit of a double-edged sword here because, on the one hand, you mentioned about how much leadership is changing, and it always changes, but it has been the speed of the change has been definitely faster over the last 5 or 10 years than it was in the past. There are a lot of people who are in leadership roles, and they've been in those roles for 10 years or longer, and maybe they were effective 10 or 20 years ago, and they're no longer effective because they were unable to change as fast as the job is expecting them to change in order to meet their people where they are. And a lot of those roles are changing because the people are quitting and new people are coming in. And so there can be a positive aspect of this in that it can lead to having some new people come in where some people who really needed to get out are getting out and who are leaving. And so, the prematurely promoting somebody isn't a good thing. But if they are replacing a person who was not right for their role to begin with, and who was going to have a really hard time adapting to leading in this world, net it could end up being a positive if that newly promoted, prematurely promoted person gets the support that they need. And that's what this needs to be about. Is there's no way to stop people from getting prematurely promoted in this environment. It's going to happen. It's how do we mitigate the potential fallout from that happening? And the way to mitigate it is unequivocally communication and support for those people. So if you are promoting somebody and you're bringing them in from the outside, maybe they have not had a lot of experience doing that particular role in a leadership capacity, but they did that role well from a individual contributor capacity at the previous organization, and they interviewed well, and they have great communication skills, and they look like they'd be a good leader. That doesn't necessarily mean they're going to be a good leader, but they could be if they have the support that they need. When I see a lot of leaders fail, it's because they don't know how to react in certain situations. They react poorly, and it starts this downward slide where they don't know how to kind of pull themselves out of it. And having that support from the beginning from a group of seasoned leaders or people who are doing the promoting and the hiring, if you are those people and you are giving these newly promoted and prematurely promoted people the support that they need and the mentorship they need, you could turn the tide and make sure that they are the right people for the role. Because prematurely promoted does not mean wrongly promoted. It just means that there's going to be some growing pains.
Yeah, no, and I love your point about when you're replacing another leader and you're prematurely promoting somebody, what are the aspects that they bring and what are the competent skills or capabilities that they bring with them into that role? Because like in my perspective, I am always willing to, take a chance on somebody maybe on the front end of their career where they're still learning, they have a lot of high ceiling, they've got a lot of potential. If they have the right mix of energy and positivity and humility and capability and aptitude and the ability to like learn lessons quickly and move on, and to what you were just saying, like knowing when to speed up and knowing when to slow down, knowing when to take partners. Like you have these kind of these elements of leadership that you see within somebody and you say, I can work with that. And I would much rather have a leader in that space that you can work with, that's effective, but also has great relationships with the team and with different people. I would much rather have that than somebody who maybe is like stagnant or again subscribes to like other antiquated ways of leadership or doesn't have relationships with the team. And so I think that it's I'm always willing to roll the dice there. And for most of the time, it works out really, really well because you can then spend the time in supporting, training, providing them with experiences, but you have to know that. Like you have to know that that's what you're doing with somebody, and being clear with them around what does that look like, why was the decision made, how are you looking at them in regards to their career, their growth, their development. I had a conversation a few months ago with a leader around kind of the idea of performance and potential, and saying like some people get promoted because of a performance standpoint, like they're really good at the role that they have, they're mentoring others, they've shown this capability of being able to teach and grow their peer group, and then they get promoted into a job where now they have that kind of as a responsibility, and they're able to do the job and then teach people how to become more efficient or more effective in the job. And then some people get promoted out of potential, which is that, you've shown these mixtures of leadership skill sets and relationships and abilities in this part of the business maybe, and now you're getting promoted into a different part of the business because these are the things that you bring there. And there's no expectation that you will have this level of, understanding of systems or of processes or of technical aspects, because that's not why you got promoted. You got promoted for these things and not those things, but you need to learn these things over here. So like trust your gut in these spaces and take your time to learn the parts of the job that you don't know. And I don't think we do a good enough job from a leadership standpoint, big picture, of doing that with people and explaining that to those that are getting promoted so that they understand, they can walk into a role with the confidence as to why a decision was made, but also the understanding of what are the things they're going to have to focus on, work on. And I think that, to me, is when I heard you say support, that's immediately what popped into my head. Like, that's the level of clarity and support that's necessary to help somebody continue on their career, knowing that they're being either prematurely promoted or that just simply that they're on the front end of their career, and that there's a lot of potential there, and we're putting them in a spot to be able to grow and develop that potential.
Right. The article brings up, first of all, I don't like the idea of saying to a person you were prematurely promoted. So it's a great article, title, but you wouldn't want to promote somebody and say, by the way, you've been prematurely promoted.
Right.
That's not always a good thing. But the idea of potential, prematurely promoted, doesn't necessarily mean, like, when you pull something out of the oven prematurely, it doesn't mean it wasn't going to be good. It just means it just means you did too early, right?
Too early. Yeah.
So it's the same thing. It starts with saying to that person, and this is according to the article, that you believe in them. You believe in what they're going to do and their potential. That they were promoted not necessarily because of a long track record of success, but because of a belief in future potential, because of the things that we're seeing in this area, and this area, and this area. And to say to these people, there's going to be missteps and there's going to be mistakes, and the expectation of perfection is not a thing. And communication to say, we need to talk about this regularly, we need to touch base regularly, or at 30, 60, 90 days, and then monthly or quarterly, whatever works for that particular person, to make sure that there is a continued belief by that person that you are there as their leader to support them, and that you understand that when they've been promoted into this role and it's going to be new for them, that you're there to support them in the that you're there to support them in the execution of the role, not just in like cheerleading them into the spot and then saying, all right, you're in this spot now, it's all on you. I think a lot of leaders want to support their people, and they want to support newly promoted people, and in their mind and in their heart they believe they are, because they have like an open door policy. Yeah, they'll come to me if they have a question. As a person who has been promoted into roles over the course of years, there is a very real fear that if I go to somebody and say, hey, I'm struggling with this, that the real reaction is going to be, oh, this person was not right for the role. And that's a tough fear to get over for someone who is newly promoted, and they are likely to not come to you unless you kind of force the interaction to happen. They're likely to try to do it on their own. Now, that's fine. Like, you want people who are kind of, let's try to do this on their own. But if they are truly not coming to you after a problem happens, then it means that they believe that the support isn't there. And sometimes you have to force those interactions to happen and say, this is a regularly scheduled thing where we're going to talk about this. And that way they're not tying it into like, to thinking, oh, they're going to have this conversation with me because they think I messed up. It's like, no, this is our monthly conversation or our biweekly conversation. It's going to happen for the next 90 days. And we're going to talk about the missteps that I had and how to get through them so they don't happen again. So it really has to be scheduled and done like that. The other thing I want to bring up too is that, there's a lot of data in this article too. It cites Gallup's chief research scientist, Jim Harder, who was, we interviewed him on the show last May, talking about how that 42% of the people who have quit over the last 2 years, they say that the number one reason is management and culture. Like, they left because they didn't like their boss. A newly promoted leader, especially one who their people know is newly promoted, is going to come they're going to get a little bit of grace from their people, but they're not going to get a lot of grace from their people, especially people who may have been on the verge of leaving because of a terrible leader or a bad leader who was there before them. And so there might be a little bit of a leeway there where it's like, okay, somebody's new is in here. Let's see how they do. And you have this real opportunity to kind of turn the tide of potentially, damage that was being caused by someone who's now out, and change the culture of that team of people. But it has to be done gingerly, and it has to be done with a really high level of transparency. Meaning that leader has to feel comfortable saying to their people, hey, this is new for me, and I need you to help me do this job well. I need you to help me be successful as your leader. And they might not do that. The same reason they're less likely to come to you as their boss to say, hey, I'm struggling with this. They're really less likely to go to their own people and say, I'm struggling with this. And so being able to model that behavior by going to them and saying, hey, help me do my role better, is one of the first things you can do to make sure that they feel comfortable doing it with their own people.
Yeah, and I think it's a great point, and it's something that I think is extremely powerful when you have people in new leadership roles. And just one of the things that I will share with new leaders is like, you have this window of time. You have this window of time, and it depends upon the role that you have and level of responsibility. But typically it's a couple of weeks. 2 to 3 weeks is about how long you have of continuous time with teams to really define who you are as a leader, what your brand is, and what you stand for. Because to your exact point, like that's the lens in which most people will look, is like, who are they? How do they make me feel? What are they saying? Because I can't see any of their work until we're down this path quite a bit, so I can only take them at their word. But what they say matters so much in that first couple of weeks. And again, if you have a leader who's promoted within their own team, then again, it's a matter of what was their brand when they were a peer, and then do they have any of the of the leverage they can utilize in the new role to ask for grace if they were a well-respected and liked peer. In this example, it's like it's a whole new team. People may know of you, but they don't really know you. But my advice always is like, you need to spend those first couple of weeks really just getting to know people. And then my practice that I ask people to go do is go out there and ask them what they expect from you. Exactly what you were saying. As the new leader in this business, what can I do for you to make your job easier, more effective, or more efficient? How, what are the spaces that you want me to play, and what can I do for you? And write it down and take it serious, and make that how you're going to hold yourself accountable. And then as you start to do some of that work, you go back and revisit with those people and say, hey, when I first got here, you said this is the space that you wanted me to fulfill. This is what I've been, doing. How am I doing with that, right? And because you're bringing people along on that journey with you, and you're building that bank of grace. People are like, oh, well, if you ask me and I tell you and you're willing to do it and you follow up with me, I'm going to work with you on this. I'm going to allow you and some of the mistakes that you make to get away with them and give you that. But like, it's not I'm the new boss, here's my expectations, this is where we need to get going. It really is that idea of working in service of others. And I remember getting that speech from mentors and leaders in my professional career of exactly that type of thing. Maybe not exactly what that strategy was, but very similarly, like, you need to spend time getting to know the team. And that's kind of what they meant by that. And I found that very valuable. Have you seen similarly, like the same type of advice in your career, or are there times that you found yourself providing that same level of advice to other leaders?
I try to provide it whenever I can. I wouldn't say that I've gotten it a lot in my career. I've gotten a lot of kind of positive reactions from people if a mistake is made, from a boss saying, hey, this is, try this instead, try that instead. So again, a lot of second and third chances to do things right, which is great because I think a lot of people are not afforded the same thing. I've not been fortunate enough a lot to have a lot of people do what you just said, though. And so, but I know the importance of it, and I really try to do it for anybody that I can. Maybe almost even too much, to the point of letting people off the hook more than I should. Because at the same time, if I'm involved in the promotion of somebody, then I have a tendency to take on the ownership of their success. Now, on the one hand, from a standpoint of eliminating roadblocks and making sure the tools are there, making sure the knowledge is there, I think it's a good responsibility to take on. I think if you help somebody get promoted, or you are responsible for putting somebody into a new role, you should take it upon yourself to make sure that as few roadblocks are there as possible, and that they have the support and the communication that they need. But this is as my interview last week with Gil Dennis, what he said is you can't shoulder that burden to the point where you take away the responsibility from them. They have to be the ones to show up and do it, because at the end of the day, you didn't pull somebody off the street and promote them and then expect them to do something. At the end of the day, if they were promoted, even if it was prematurely, there are reasons you promoted them. There are reasons that you put them in that role. There are things that you saw out of them that led you to believe that they would be a good fit for this role. And unless you were terribly, terribly wrong, they need to step up and show that they have the capability of doing this. And so it's a fine line. You have to be able to show support without leading them to believe that you are wholly responsible for the outcomes of their decisions when they really are at the end of the day.
Absolutely. And with that, it brings us to this episode's 1 minute hack. But first, a few words from our sponsors.
The 1 minute hack.
All right, for this episode's 1 minute hack, here's what I want you to do. I want you to look at all the people that have been recently promoted in your organization that you have influence over, even if you weren't involved in the hiring process itself. Write their names down and go and have a conversation with them about their experience in leadership. And if any of them are in their very first leadership role. So this has nothing to do with being prematurely promoted or not. If they are in their first leadership role, by definition, this is the first time they're going to be in charge of leading people. And they might do the job really well from an execution standpoint, but if it's their first leadership role, there's going to be some struggles. So map out a planned communication rhythm with every one of them that works with both your schedules that you hold to. And it has to be pretty rigid where nothing else gets in the way. You map it out on your calendar and that person and you have to sit down and have a conversation. And it doesn't have to be a long time. We're not talking days here. We're talking, maybe 30 minutes weekly or bi-weekly. It might be all it is. But force the conversation to happen when it comes to figuring out how to help them through roadblocks. And it needs to start, every conversation needs to start with you telling them the roadblocks you've encountered in your own leadership, because they have to feel comfortable in sharing with you the struggles that they've had in executing their role as a newly promoted leader. If they don't feel comfortable saying that, the conversation is going to be the same every time. Yeah, I'm good. Yeah, all's good. Yeah, what can I do for you? Oh, nothing. I'm solid. I'm good. Yeah, that's everyone's going to be like that. So start with saying the issues that you're having, and they will reciprocate with where they're going with also. The other thing to keep in mind too, this is going to be the first generation of newly promoted leaders. You're talking about people between the ages of 22 and 38. These are the people who are making life decisions as well when it comes to where they're going to live, whether they're going to be buying a house, starting families. These kind of things are weighing heavily on these people's minds, and you being able to show the support that you need, that they can have the time they need in their personal lives, and they're not going to be sacrificing those things or the plans they're making or their emotional health because you expect too much of them at work. That's going to be the impetus for them staying a long time, and then kind of passing that along to the people reporting up through them.
Yeah, I think it's a great hack and a reminder of the importance of sharing testimony as a leader and talking about the things that we've experienced or when we first got leadership roles, remembering back to then. And I agree with you. Like I like to share some of that and kind of laugh a little bit and be like, yeah, I remember when I had this level of responsibility and some of the things that I did and mistakes that I made and stuff that I figured out and learned. And I know there's a lot of that you'll take away in development within all of that journey itself. But then also, I love underlining the understanding that people are also making decisions personally as well as professionally here. And these are exciting times, but they're also can be highly stressful times. And there's a lot of things that are happening that are changing, and being conscious of that as a leader is helpful for them to be able to make sure that they are getting the time they need to both develop professionally, but also to establish themselves personally. So I like that a lot.
Yeah, this Great Resignation, and I'm kind of taking this from Johnny C. Tyler, the president of SHRM, who I spoke with last year also. He doesn't look at it as a great resignation. He looks at it as a great reset. And I like those words because, yes, people are resigning, but when you have this kind of upheaval, there's this ability to move forward without the baggage that we've had with us for a long period of time. And again, if you believe as I believe, and that there have been a lot of people in roles for a long time, tenured in roles that they maybe shouldn't have ever been in, or at the very least, they shouldn't be in them now. This is an opportunity to get a lot of new leaders in, a lot of people who have some new talents, people who can relate to the people who they are leading, as opposed to being unable to relate to them. And a lot of good can come from this if you set it up the right way and you don't just trust that it's going to happen. If you just trust that it's going to happen, it's not going to happen.
Absolutely. And with that, it brings us to the end of this episode. This is Hacking Your Leadership. I'm Lorenzo.
And I'm Chris.
And we'll talk to you all next time.